Hello, Sam here again, and thank you to everyone for a very successful Unit 1. We hope that everyone got comfortable with Canvas and also has started to reflect a little bit on your curriculum materials that you're using in your professional life. And not only have we gotten started in the course now, but we're actually 25% complete already. So obviously one of the big goals for Unit 1 was for us to form a community in which we can continue to think together about curriculum issues in mathematics education. It was great to read your introductions and see the photos of everyone, and please remember that the introductory discussion forum will still be there in the future. So if you need to go back to refresh your memory about different people's teaching contexts or their textbooks or anything like that, you're free to go back and do that. Right now, we just want to share a few of the syntheses that people did across the class. First of all, although many of you already know each other from past courses, we have a nice group of new people joining in as well. This image is from Rob, showing the number of new students in blue and the returning students in red. Within the new students, there are some teaching fellows who are about to start their first year of teaching, but also some other teachers who are just starting the master's program. Geographically, as Lindsay showed, we have the state of Missouri well covered, but there are also 9 people from outside of Missouri, and in fact there's 1 person outside of the country, with Monique joining in from Spain. And because this course focuses on curriculum, and that includes both the official standards to be included in the curriculum, as well as the textbooks and curriculum materials that actually lay out how to achieve those standards, we wanted to mention one of the syntheses that focused on standards. Here is Michelle's representation, which shows that a majority of people mentioned the Common Core state standards, but some also mentioned the new Missouri Learning Standards, which I'd say are roughly 95% aligned with Common Core, and we also saw the Virginia Learning Standards get mentioned. In Unit 3 next week, you'll be taking a look at standards, and you are encouraged to look at those standards that are most relevant to your teaching. So in many cases this will be Common Core, but not for everyone. We were also happy to see some people having fun with the classmate synthesis assignment, so here are a few real fast fun ones. Nicholas looked to see which gender posted when, and to us it looks like there was no clear winner in the procrastination competition. Samantha Stinson analyzed the photos and noticed that a lot of people were wearing sunglasses. She made a graph of the sort of eyewear people had on. And finally, Natalie focused on the hobbies and interests that people expressed in their posts, or in their photos. And even though I didn't make a formal post in the introductory discussion forum, at least one sharp-eyed person noticed that I am a Star Trek: The Next Generation fan. And I would add that my other hobbies include playing piano and writing music, as well as reading comic books. Okay, so next we wanted to share a few quick recaps on the reading and the discussion of the Singapore materials. The article by Tar and colleagues was meant to show an example of how we can think about what the textbooks are affording our students. A key idea here is that the textbooks are not just about design or supplemental resources, or it's not even just about the sequencing and development of the topics, but they are also the basis of students' mathematical experiences. So it's important to look at whether they have interesting problems, whether they engage students actively in exploring mathematical ideas, whether they promote communication, and whether they have tasks that will motivate all students. And the article also was meant to show that motivating students is not about picking the right clip art or stock photos, or about putting the right sport on the cover of the book. It's about having interesting, high-level mathematical opportunities. And it's actually important to note that high-level mathematics tasks are not just for high-achieving students. In fact, students who have struggled in the past usually benefit the most from having better problems. This also brings us to the Singapore materials that you explored. These Singapore materials had some different features than the typical US textbooks. First of all, you probably noticed that the Singapore materials are much less busy and less crowded with their graphic design. US textbooks tend to have lots of color and stock photos and fun facts stuck in the margins. The Singapore materials are much more focused on having clean pages and keeping the focus on the mathematical ideas. Second, the Singapore materials did not always follow the US tradition of simple sort of recall problems first, moderate problems second, and then a few applied or story problems last. People noticed that the story problems were sometimes missing altogether, and some of you said in the discussion that it might be good to add those back in. But I'm also imagining that many of you would admit that the US tradition of story problems at the end of the section are seen as contrived and not very effective in helping students see connections to real life or learn mathematics more deeply. This gets at the idea of modifying the curriculum materials. And some of you were also discussing modifying the lesson by taking them and trying to put them, for example, into a 3-act lesson structure. Those ideas of modification are going to carry forward into Unit 2 this week. More on that in a second. By the way, we should mention that our inclusion of the Singapore materials was not meant to be an endorsement of those materials. Rather, we were including them as an opportunity that you might not otherwise have to look at some curriculum materials that are different from the typical U.S. textbook. And like any textbook, the Singapore materials have some promising features, but also some limitations. And so the important thing is to talk about what the good aspects and bad aspects are, rather than to just call it good or bad overall. One last thing we wanted to comment on from the Singapore discussion was the idea of repetition. People shared a lot of good thoughts on repetition and what its place is in curriculum materials and of course in students' learning of mathematics. Some people were saying that the algebra section from the Singapore materials had too much repetition, whereas some also said that the geometry section from Singapore had too little repetition. One thing to always keep in mind about the repetition in a textbook is that the textbook problems are just possibilities for the students. It's really up to the teacher and the students how much of it they actually do. So there's a lot that a teacher has control over when they work from a book and they put it into action with their students. But anyway, overall, great job on the discussion. There were lots of interactions and development of ideas, and there was a clear, respectful tone that I'm sure everyone appreciated. Please keep that up in future discussions. Okay, to wrap up this video, we just want to mention what's coming in Unit 2 this week. This week we are focusing on making and modifying curriculum. There are 2 readings about modifying curriculum materials, and then you will get your hands dirty by making some modifications to a lesson of your choice, but those modifications are going to be made to meet a particular learning goal. There are 2 required discussions in this unit, one about the readings and one about your own past experiences modifying curriculum materials. The assignment in this unit is to modify that lesson. The details are posted on Canvas, and related to the assignment, there is also an optional discussion forum where you can post your thoughts about your modified lesson. See you online.